Thank you, and good afternoon to each and every one of you. I'm hoping that you can hear in the very back, and if not, I'll speak a little louder. I know that we have a very boisterous and active group of young men and women right now, and I thank them very much, because without that advocacy, without pushing the envelope forcefully, sometimes electeds at all different levels do not act. So I think that's what we're witnessing right now. Better stated, what we're hearing right now is democracy in action. I'm honored to be here with each and every one of you, and I'm very honored to be here with these incredible panelists who I will introduce in a few moments. A couple things I want to add. Unfortunately, as you all know, Governor Jerry Brown could not be here today, but I want to make a couple comments about Governor Jerry Brown. One is, without question, we have the best governor in the United States of America, bar none. When it comes to a vision as well as an action. Now, this event is titled not just California Dreaming, Climate Action from the Golden State. So what we're doing in California is not just rhetoric, but in fact, it's action. And I want to give a very special thank you to Governor Jerry Brown, to his wonderful staff in the executive branch. I know in a few moments we'll have Cal EPA Matthew Rodriguez sharing a few pearls of wisdom, but also Mary Nichols, who's the chair of, director, I should say, of CARB, but all the good staff that he has. It's been a joy to work in concert with Governor Jerry Brown. Now, one of my highlights here in Paris, France, is that California brand resonates very loud and clear. What California does resonates not just throughout the region, the nation, but it resonates throughout the world. What we have accomplished so far is nothing short of miraculous. In pushing the envelope, because that's who we are by nature. In California, we're disruptors. We're impatient as individuals, as citizens of the great state, and we have proven so with very clear action. Just a couple highlights. Back in 2002, then Assemblywoman Fran Pavley, who's now state senator, one of my colleagues in the California State Senate, moved forward the California car standards. The California car standards became law of the land. And just 4 years ago, in 2011, our President Barack Obama, adopted the California car standards at the national level. So that means if you bought a Ford F-150 truck, internal combustion, 10 years ago, you'd get roughly V6 about 18 mpg, 18 miles per gallon, back then. If you buy a Ford F-150 today, and let's say you buy that Ford F-150 in Alabama, or Georgia, or Mississippi, or Texas. Today, because of the California car standards, that Ford F-150 gets roughly about 28 miles per gallon highway. And that's what California does. It pushes the envelope. Because irrespective of your political party, irrespective of your ethnicity, irrespective of your own ideology, who doesn't want to drive farther on a tank of gas and have more money in your pocket? And this is what California has done. Obviously, 2006, the Global Warming Solutions Act, AB 32, that set the standard not just for California, but for the world, easily surpassing the Kyoto protocols. And just recently was Senate Bill 535, which takes 25% baseline floor of all cap and trade revenue auction proceeds and invests these dollars in communities that are disproportionately impacted by both climate change, GHG, as well as other criteria pollutants. Because even though California is a great state, a great innovator, some of the wealthiest people on planet Earth live in California, we're also a state of many great contrasts, because we do also have the largest number of people who live in poverty. And these people breathe into their lungs, especially young children, NOx, SOx, particulate matter 2.5 or 10, as well as short-lived climate pollutants such as black carbon. This is a health hazard, a public health hazard to our young children. And those who are impacted disproportionately are young children of color, Latinos, African Americans, as well as poor white children and Asian Americans. So this is a public health issue. It's also a civil rights issue. And that's why we invest, through the administration, 25% baseline into these communities. Also, what we have done with my partner, Speaker Tony Atkins, is we have democratized our climate change policies, making sure, not theoretically or in an abstract manner, but concretely, that all individuals, irrespective of who they are and irrespective of where they come from, irrespective of the hue of their skin, that all individuals benefit from our climate change policies. With Senate Bill 1275, we allow low-income working families now to receive and bundle credits from our auction revenue proceeds so they themselves can purchase an electric vehicle. And also through 535, Senate Bill 535, we have a real opportunity to transform our economy by allowing investor-owned utilities, as well as municipal-owned utilities and the private sector like ChargePoint, to move forward and build out transportation electrification. So therefore, charging stations will be as ubiquitous as a Chevron gas station, BP, Shell, Valero, Tesoro, or others. That's what we're doing in California. And we're doing so in a way that we have successfully decoupled and delinked carbon from GDP. In short, California is coming off the worst economic recession since 1929. And I can tell you firsthand, Tony Atkins and I can tell you firsthand, how much we cut in our budget. Very difficult and very painful. But coming off the worst economic recession since 1929, we have also rebounded to become the 7th largest economy on planet Earth. And we have done so in a manner that we delinked and decoupled carbon from GDP. We have grown our economy. We have added 466,000 jobs in the clean energy space, energy efficiency, as well as renewables. Simultaneously, our carbon intensity for an economy of this scale has decreased by 28%. We're doing so because we are moving public policy forcefully through the legislative branch, working in concert with our partners, our equal partners in the executive branch, to reduce carbon, increase and grow our economy, while at the same time protecting the health of our young children. Now, we have ways to go still, but what we're proving here in Paris is that it can be done, and we can export both our technologies as well as political leadership and public policies throughout the world. Now, it is our hope, obviously, that we reach a legal binding agreement very soon, with the next few days. But one thing that California is not doing is California is not going to hold its breath for action here or elsewhere. We're doing it now through the legislative branch, also with working in partnership with our good friends, our partners through the executive branch, but we're also doing it with the private sector, sending very clear market signals to the private sector, consistency for investments in the state of California. We're not an island unto ourselves. We're a global economy. And what we do makes a difference, not just in California, but throughout the world. Sitting down and meeting with the Israelis, with the Mexicans, with the Australians, just a few moments ago, proves that they want the California brand, our technologies, our public policies to resonate in their parts of the world. So today, I'm very honored to be with some fantastic individuals who KR from Bloom Energy, the chair and CEO of Bloom Energy, another disruptor in the state of California, who is going to be our great moderator here today. But on behalf of the governor, the great governor of the great state of California, I thank each and every one of you for allowing me to indulge myself for a few moments. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Senator. I do want to note to everyone watching online, you can get your questions in using the hashtag AskUSCenter. And now I'd like to introduce again our moderator for our discussion here, Dr. K.R. Streeter, who is the principal co-founder and chief executive officer of Bloom Energy, prior to which he was the director of Space Technologies Laboratory at the University of Arizona, where he was also professor of aerospace and mechanical engineering. And he's considered one of the early pioneers in green tech, so a great person to have hosting this panel. So go ahead.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And President Pro Tem Camendillion, thank you for those kind words. I am proud today to stand here as a Californian. We have come as a big delegation, the governor, Madam Speaker, President Pro Tem, the entire delegation, Tom Steyer, a lot of CEOs. So I'm standing here on behalf of the entire delegation. And if you look at the delegation, there's one thing you will realize. It's a very inclusive delegation. And when I look at the title, I'm going to use my my moderator's prerogative to slightly change the title of what you're going to hear. A global dream, a California reality. We're going to tell you how we can scale it to reality for the entire globe. It is not a California dream, it's a California reality. So there are two stories out here that you're going to hear from all of us. One is how collectively and inclusively in the state we have tackled the climate change problem and gotten farther than any other state in the country, farther than most places in the world of our scale and our economy, the 8th largest economy, and why what we have done there is scalable across the world. That's number one. And we have done this, most importantly, not by just dealing with it as climate change. As President Pro Tem very articulately explained, we have taken an inclusive policy of democratizing energy, making sure that every citizen in the state, while we are making this transformation to decarbonize, has great health. Criteria pollutants come down. Innovation flourishes. Entrepreneurship flourishes. Great technologies are developed and proven out. Their costs come down and their reliability goes up. So we can now bring this to the rest of the world. That is in a nutshell the story, but it's a very important story, and we feel very compelled to tell this because for those of you who follow sports, from the time we started having any track and field till 1954, nobody could break the 4-minute a mile barrier. Roger Bannister comes along and breaks the record in 1954. Within 2 months, 2 other people break it. Today, breaking the 4-minute mile barrier is a requirement if you need to be a global sprinter. So the proof of concept of saying you can do something good for the climate without compromising economy, jobs, health, well-being is a very important proof of concept that had a lot of naysayers. And California, through very good leadership, through policy, through entrepreneurship, our great education system, through our people, have demonstrated that. So with those opening comments, I'm going to start the other way and have you conclude since you had the opening remarks, Gabriel. So Madam Speaker, you have put a lot of attention to inclusiveness, and you care a lot about affordability and people at the lower end of the economic ladder doing well as we make this transformation. Please.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you so much, and it's really wonderful to be here. And I want to thank my colleague, Senate President De Leon, because he really set the stage, I think, for what we, as did you, set the stage for what we're trying to do in California. I would say one of the most important things is there were a few years ago, not that long ago, and the senator mentioned Fran Pavley, which I think is really important because AB 32 and the Global Warming Act of 2006 really set the stage. And there was an attempt several years ago to undo AB 32. And what was significant about that is the population of California strongly supported AB 32 and did so in a way that went against a lot of money. So it really was the community, the voters, and so I want to recognize the advocates, the NGOs, the business community, as well as the environmental community, and just regular Californians who think this is important. And I want to add someone else to that. In California, the senator talked about us being the 7th largest economy in the world. We do see ourselves as a nation state. The diversity that we have, 38 million people. The military is playing an incredible role. And as someone from San Diego, who the military is a big part of our GDP locally, but it is also for the state of California. And to find, and most people may not know, that the military has actually taken a huge step forward. This year, a few months ago in Coronado, the Navy, the military, the Department of Defense signed the largest renewable alternative contract in the country, which will make a third of the power used in the 14 installations, the military, the Marines, and the Navy throughout California. A third of their power will come from renewables. So we like to think of this partnership as global, starting from within our state. The Assembly, I am Kevin's partner on the other side in the legislature. We've had a working group on climate for the last several years, chaired by the incoming next Speaker of the California State Assembly, Anthony Rendon, who is here as well. I think some issues that we're going to continue to face, you know, I said the other night at a dinner, it feels like a ribbon cutting because we have had success and it has taken years, and it's been the innovation, it's been the driving force from all of those stakeholders that I mentioned earlier, but clearly the role of the governor, and I think Kevin was right to acknowledge Governor Brown for his vision, but it was also, let me just give a lot of credit to Kevin, because this has been his central theme and body of work since he entered the legislature, from a perspective of someone who grew up in a disadvantaged community in San Diego, but then moved to Los Angeles, where he represents other disadvantaged communities. So in addition to the legislation he mentioned, his own, 535, SB 350, I wanted to include a couple of other things and then turn it over so we can continue with the dialogue. But from the Assembly side, AB 1288, which is going to focus on disadvantaged communities, and some of the broader discussions here about how do you pay for the pollution that has been done and have it impact the communities where the pollution has really impacted those disadvantaged communities. 1288 is going to make sure that resources actually flow, in addition to some other legislation that Kevin sponsored a couple of years ago. AB 1071, well, that's AB 1071. 1288 is going to make sure that we actually get representatives from disadvantaged communities to participate in the discussion at the California Air Resources Board. So I think now our challenge is going to be implementation. And also you will find up and down the state, cities like my own, San Diego, have really taken the next step to make sure that they, as local jurisdictions throughout the state, are setting their own goals. And some of them are actually more aggressive and assertive than what we've done at the state. And that's good. It means it's going to push us further and faster. But it's going to take all of us working together, the business community certainly coming together with us and the NGOs and the communities. But I think we feel pretty good today about where we are as a state, understanding that we have implementation and work to do, and it's going to take all of us. I see many of our stakeholders here. You're going to hear from NRDC, the work that they do, and so it feels good today to be in a state where the leadership really can help set the policy and the vision, and then we have Cal EPA and Mary Nichols at CARB to actually help us implement it on the ground and make sure no one's left behind.
Thank you again for your leadership in the State Assembly. And, you know, a couple of very important points you made here. For us, it's and, it's not or, it's inclusive. And, you know, a couple of great points you made out here are reliability and resiliency. The reason the military wants this, the reason we as, you know, we in California, we live in earthquake country. We need reliability, we need resiliency. The good thing is, as we are solving the climate crisis, as we make our energy resources more distributed, it automatically brings in a resiliency and reliability that you otherwise don't get. So that is an additional win that we have, and it is a security issue, it's a resiliency issue, it's a reliability issue, in addition to a climate issue, in addition to an access issue. So it's that and. Thank you so much. Riesu, the next speaker, is the President and CEO of NRDC, the National Resources Defense Council. You were with the Obama administration prior to this, and now you have well over 1 million extremely bright, extremely smart, very passionate defenders of planet Earth. And you find a way to channel that energy to doing good in the planet. Oftentimes, the naysayers, again, talk about the environmental movement as you're always trying to stop the good for the better or for the perfect. That's not what you've done. You've brought in so much policy. What do you do? How do you do it? And how can the world learn from you?
Okay, well, thank you very much for that question, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. It's truly an honor to be with this incredibly distinguished panel, and I have to just take a moment to thank specifically Speaker Atkins and Senate President De Leon for your tremendous leadership. The state would not be on the trajectory that it's on without the political vision, the political leadership, and the political skill to drive us in the directions that we all really want to move in, and you have just been incredible partners and visionaries and leaders for the state, and we're all indebted. You know, a quick note about NRDC and California. I mean, it's really fun to kind of see the California state flag up there, and I have to say it's a little bit odd to be in Paris and to see the California state flag almost everywhere I go. The California delegation, which I know many in the audience represent, has been a powerful force in the negotiations here in Paris. You have registered your voice, your expectation, your visions, your stories, and your lessons. And I will tell you with no degree of uncertainty, the world is listening. The world is looking at California as a leader and wants to know what the secrets of the success of California are, because they want to model that. You know, California has long captured the imagination of the world. When you just think about California and you think about what the kind of California image represents, NRDC loves California so much, we not only have one office there, we have two offices there in Northern and Southern California. We are an environmental advocacy organization that has a long presence in the state, and we're an environmental advocacy organization that has long been focused on energy and climate within the context of California. But we're also an environmental advocacy organization whose primary responsibility is to uplift the voices of our members, of which a huge proportion of them comes from California, to ensure that policymakers are being held to account on what it is they want for their state, for their future, for their families, and for their communities. And what is so fascinating about the evolution of California clean energy policies over the course of the decades now is that it has not only led the way in how we think about the very fundamental framework of clean energy, whether you look at the industrial sector, the transportation sector, the building sector, or the power sector. In each one of those fundamental sectors of clean energy, California has led the way, and the blueprint of how to think about that, whether you're India or China or the United States, actually comes from California. That's super exciting stuff. But you know what's even more exciting? Is thinking and learning from the recent legislation that was just passed in California about how to ensure that we take this moment in time where we now have momentum, clear political conviction and will, to ensure that the people who have been living with the dangerous impacts of fossil fuel production for decades are not being left behind, that the frontline, fence line communities are being served by the legislation that we move forward in a way that moves us towards a more just and equitable community and society. California is leading the way in thinking about that, and I tell you, The world is watching. So it is a privilege to be part of an environmental organization that has so many partners, so many friends, so many opportunities. We can't get enough of it in California. In addition to the great political leadership, we have incredible leadership from the private sector, and I think that coming out of Paris, we are just beginning to see the opportunities to partner with the private sector and the opportunities for the private sector to start leading the momentum around this clean energy transformation for our economy. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Ria. And it is, you know, they always say in a democracy, the people get the government they deserve. And thanks to you and your members and their advocacy, we have such phenomenal leadership at the state administrative level and in the Senate and in the Assembly. So once great laws come about, we need to enforce it. We need to execute to it. And we are enforcing cap and trade. The whole world is watching to see how that'll play out. And all that falls in the hands of an enforcement agency. As Cal EPA's administrator, Matt Rodriguez, is sitting at the driver's seat of that organization. You know, it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome. And we're looking forward to your remarks.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be here in particular with the speaker and the pro tem, because the important message that I think that we would want to send is that California is deeply committed to doing something about climate change. And you can see that commitment not only in the executive branch, but in the legislative branch as well. It requires all of us working together to really send that signal that California is serious about doing something on climate change issues. That's important for the regulated community. It's important for the entrepreneurial community to know that we're serious about these policies, that we're committed to enforcing them over the long run, and that we're also willing to sit down and look at these programs and continue to work with them to make sure that we're getting the effect that we need to have. And if there's something we're missing, we're willing to work on it to make the programs more effective. Because at the end of the day, really what we're dealing with is a program that has to succeed. I'll just briefly touch on the fact that coming here to the COP, I leave a state that has been dealing with a drought over the last 4 years. Now, I'm not going to tell you that climate change caused this particular drought, but what climate change does is it makes these droughts more intensive. It makes it more likely that we're going to have to deal with droughts in the future. The impact of a drought, we've got water shortages in the state. It's really required that we reconsider how we deal with water and water law and water resources in the state of California. But the legislature has stepped up to the plate with us. The legislature has worked with the administration to change our laws to deal with water and to change the way that we look at water in the state of California. So it shows the state's commitment to dealing with problems as we see that they arise. Similarly, we've got 20 million dead trees in the state of California. We've got 80 to 100 million trees that are dying in the state of California. So we know we've got to invest in forest management and look at what are we going to do in the future to deal with forests and make sure that they're healthy, resilient, and that we can continue that part of California. There's a great economic aspect to all of this. I mean, climate is synonymous with California. It's one of the reasons that people want to live there. It's in many ways the backbone of the economy. I think that's one of the reasons why you can't look at this as just an environmental program. It is an environmental program that serves the overall purposes of the state of California. And so our programs are designed to both look at environmental benefits from these programs, but also to ensure that we're receiving the right social and economic benefits. So you see climate programs that are across the board dealing with some very, very difficult but interrelated issues. Where do we get our energy from? People have heard me say this before, but basically our approach in California is threefold. Look at where our energy is coming from. See if we can move away from carbon-based energy. Let's use that energy more efficiently. Fortunately, California has a very, very long history of energy efficiency, such that it's second only to Massachusetts in energy efficiency in the United States. But our per capita energy use in California is far lower than the rest of the United States. And that's because of these programs that we've been enforcing over a 40-year period of time. That leads to lower energy costs for the residents of California. So we're interested in energy efficiency. Additionally, the final step, can we use or can we live our lives in a way that makes us more energy efficient and we use less energy? So we're looking at how do we design our cities? How do we work on sustainable cities? So what you see in California is a wide range of programs to deal with all those issues. Cap and trade is an important part of that. Frankly, we felt that if we didn't get that cap and trade program correct, others wouldn't be willing to do a cap and trade program. But learning from what went on in the EU, learning from what was done in the RGGI states, we feel like we've got a very successful program. We've been able to link it with a program in another country, something that really people question whether we would be able to do. It's been a successful program. And not only is it reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but it's bringing in additional money into the California Treasury that, due to the foresight of the legislature, and in particularly the pro tem, we're investing that money in programs that further reduce greenhouse gas emissions and also that specifically target disadvantaged communities in California, because we want to make sure that these programs benefit all Californians. And so we're making sure that we are bringing energy efficiency to housing in disadvantaged communities. We are, as was mentioned, trying to make sure that the benefits of electric vehicles and public transportation in electric buses, that gets to the disadvantaged communities. We're looking at, is there something we can do to, as these programs are being done, can we use these programs to promote job opportunities in disadvantaged communities? So across the board, we see this as an opportunity to deal with a range of interrelated issues. And so part of my role is to take a look at the programs, see if they're, make sure that they're working the way that we want them to. If we see corrections that need to be made, not be afraid to make those corrections and make sure that these programs are reaching all segments of California. We feel that we've got a good story to tell. That's one of the reasons why we're here at the Conference of Parties. And what verifies that is that so many other countries are interested and so many other subnational governments are interested in talking to us about what do we do in California, how do you make this work. There's a lot we can still learn. And it's a constant process of refining these programs, looking at new things that we can do, looking for new opportunities. But we're willing to take on that challenge because we think at the end of the day, that's what makes California such a great place to be.
Matt, that was brilliant. You just brought in a dimension. The environment and what we're doing in California is not just about advantaged humans, not just about disadvantaged humans, it's about them. But it's about all life forms, ocean life forms, trees, and they all have an impact. The less the trees, the less the amount of CO2 absorption. So every possible means with which we can lower CO2, we need to be doing it. We need to be doing it as and not or. And thank you for bringing that dimension here in this discussion. So I'm going to move from you to Tom Werner, a good friend and a fellow CEO. The two companies, SunPower that he runs, he's going to talk about, and Bloom, have something in common, which is a story that happens a lot in the US. And great educational institutions are funded with large programs, including the space exploration program. Great universities, like professors take that on and then go on to start companies. And that's what happened to SunPower. SunPower's first solar panels were built for satellites, for the NASA programs and for the military programs by a Stanford professor. And Tom came into the company when it was facing the proverbial valley of death, and with amazing executional skill, has built a great company which has the highest efficiency solar cells on the planet. So Tom Werner?
Well, amazing skill. It's good to be at the right place at the right time as well. And we were at the right place at the right time because of the leadership that's sitting at the stage here, the speaker and the president pro tem, because they have many voices and tugging at them and saying it can't be done and you can't change, and you can imagine some of the voices that the change that we've talked about here, that they had the courage to cause change to happen and create policies that gave us long-term visibility, and companies like Bloom and SunPower could thrive. And there's a number of other companies in California that are leaders because we have policy that gives us a market with visibility that we can invest in. And so they've created an environment in California where we can invest. And so the idea that climate change is a business challenge became a business opportunity. And so we can take climate change and make it a business opportunity. And think about like solar. The cost of solar in California, but around the world, has come down 80% in 5 years, the cost of a solar panel. So the idea that you have to pay more for renewable energy is just not true. It's just not factually true. In California, you can install and lease a solar system and you can pay less than conventional electricity. And it's because of their leadership. They created the market that allowed it to scale, that allowed us to get costs down, that allowed it to become a virtuous upcycle and become a cost to an opportunity. And you see that, that's what California is great at. And so we have the opportunity to do business in Australia or Mexico or some of the other places that Kevin mentioned. And they do in fact say, you know, how did you guys do it? And how do you create that scale and how do you have that visibility? The next thing that's happening that I thought it'd be cool to talk about was there's they've taken action on storage, because the myth of, oh, renewables can't work at scale because they're intermittent and it's going to destroy the grid and all that is going to be debunked as well. And it's because of their leadership creating the market mechanisms that allows us to add storage to solar, to baseload fuel cells, and energy management and energy conservation. And you can combine those things with software, which is what California is great at as well. And then imagine what you can do. You can look at solar generation or fuel cell energy generation. You can store it, use it when you want. Combine that with energy management, reducing the most costly energy, and then with software you can optimize it too. And so the whole idea that this is going to disrupt the grid is going to be turned on its head, and it's going to enhance the grid, and it's going to make the grid more effective. And cost of energy will come down, and we have clean energy, and we're going to demonstrate that in California. And so California is a leader, and one of the things that I think will come out of COP is the idea that business can lead by getting costs down, by making it a good customer solution, and the idea that this is a penalty becomes an opportunity. And so we play a role, but it's because of their leadership that we have the opportunity to do that. Those are my comments.
Tom, thank you. So there's a very interesting option here of when you combine these discrete energy forms, diversity always leads to strength is what we say, even about our people, our state, our world. Different ideas, diversity. Same thing with technology. The diverse technologies being integrated together bring about a resiliency. And then you put that in a microgrid. You have local power where you need it, 24/7, reliable, inexpensive, sustainable, affordable. And that is the vision. That is how middle of Africa will get powered. That is how Asia will get powered. The important question, people say, is it all about climate? What happens to the developing world? You guys built it. What are you doing? My answer is very simple. 1.5 billion people don't have access to electricity. Another 1.5 billion don't have affordable power. So 3 billion people are left out for the last 100 years with the old business model. How many more 100 years are we going to wait for those people to get it? This is the new business model. It'll not only be better for the planet, it'll be accessible and affordable. And that's the California vision. It's reality. It's coming to you soon. But we couldn't have done that again but for our political leadership and policies. And you heard from everyone across the board, starting with me, about the President Pro Tem, Kevin DeLeon, and what a great leader he has been. My only question is, how do we clone you so we can put you all around the world and get this done faster? Kevin?
You're much too kind. I just want to give a very special recognition to our president, President Barack Obama, the president and his administration through Brian Dees inside the White House, as well as his cabinet members, have been very strong in Washington, D.C., advancing a climate change policy. It is the reality that he doesn't have equal partners with him in the Congress who wish to engage on the issue of climate for a whole variety of political and ideological and special interest reasons. But it is important to recognize the president because he has taken unilateral action in his engagement just recently with the Chinese government. The Chinese government just a few months ago announced that they'll be going to a cap-and-trade system similar to the state of California. We're looking forward to engage them. I know that we have Nancy Sutley here, who Nancy's, I mentioned Nancy because Nancy used to be the climate advisor to the president, President Barack Obama. She's my constituent, so she's my voter. You know, she votes for me. I hope she does, at least, you know. Yeah, that's what she tells me, you know. In Los Angeles, she lives in the same neighborhood, and we have a lot of wonderful leaders in the audience today. We've got Senator Bob Wachowski here, who deals with mitigation and adaptation because of climate. We have a up-and-coming young leader from one of the most impoverished southeast corner of California, one of the most poverty-stricken areas, which is the Coachella Valley, Riverside and Imperial County, and Eduardo Garcia, Assembly Member Eduardo Garcia, who's a very bright, future in this space. But you are correct, and absent me, this issue is it would not have come to fruition without political leadership. You need political leadership because investment capital does not flow if there are not very clear market signals. And if the investment capital's not there, the technologies that have been created will never come to fruition. So when you have someone like Governor Jerry Brown, when you have Tony Atkins, she's my equal partner, and it doesn't get done if I don't have a partner on the other side, and vice versa, where we can work in concert with each other. If you don't have NGOs, like RIA, the NRDC, and capable technicians, like Matthew Rodriguez, and then obviously you, KR, and Tom from the private sector, that you go and you attract the dollars, from your investment capital to get this going. But without political leadership, this does not come to fruition, period. Because it's not the chicken or the egg. How it starts is with political leadership that sets the very clear policies and the mandates and the benchmarks for verification that are very critical. And I believe that engaging, as all of us have, with many of the subnationals and other nations, witnessing what California has done, and it's not that we're special or unique. We are unique in many ways, but what has happened in California can happen elsewhere throughout the world, whether it's in Israel, whether it's in the European Union, whether it is in China or India or elsewhere. We have learned from the European Union what to do. We have learned from the European Union what not to do. Also, at the same time, we ourselves, as trailblazers, as innovators, we will make our mistakes as well. We are not perfect by no stretch of the imagination. We have stumbled. We have gotten up, and Matthew says something that's really important. It is absolutely critical that our cap and trade program and other programs that we get it right because the world is watching. What Ray has said is the world is watching. Coming back from Mexico and from China, I can tell you very clearly, without any sense of hubris, the world is watching very closely what happens in California. And that's why we got to get it right. And once we get it right, we know that we can export our policies, our know-how, our technologies. Some of the great folks here on this panel, yourself and great folks here in the audience here today, and we can make a major difference. This would be in the abstract if we said, hey, listen, we got an idea. And we said, we're going to move the greatest climate change policy on planet Earth. But your gas prices are going to go through the roof, and your utility rates are going to go through the roof. That would be political suicide. Who would do that? Nobody would do that. So, but we're proving that the price of renewables is either at parity or actually is below cost in comparison to other traditional fossil fuels. So these disruptive technologies, yeah, they are disruptive to traditional business models, but we're proving that it can be done, and I'm just honestly proud to work with my partner, Tony, you know, because Tony's been exceptional as the leader of the assembly, and with folks like Rhea and Tom and yourself and Matthew and folks here, we're working together in concert with each other simply just to make a better world for everybody.
Thank you very much. And I think I'm speaking on behalf of Tom and the other CEOs who represent the California delegation in saying the following. Policy certainty over a long period of time. Policy scaling, how you created a small program for solar, and as solar was growing, expanded that to the Million Roofs program. As you created a program for us, and you constantly look at what is the next thing to do. Tom mentioned storage, how to bring that in, how to glide each one to a larger scale so we can make big scale impact in a timely fashion as it goes. And in the policy math as it concerns to business, 1 + 1 is less than 2, because if you just give us policy certainty for a year, we will get no investment. Okay? 10 + 10 is far greater than 20, because that is long-term certainty, and the amount of money that will come in is very high. So this predictable long-term policy to create a market, what you've all done, our hats off to you. Most of you know California and Silicon Valley as technical entrepreneurship. I think what we're seeing here is political entrepreneurship, policy entrepreneurship, advocacy entrepreneurship. All that combined is why it's a California reality and not a California dream. Thank you very much. I'll take some questions. Do we have time?
Yep. Yeah, we have some time for some questions. Raise your hand. We'll take a couple in a row so we get more questions. Is that okay with everybody? Great. All right, 1, 2, 3. How about that?
Thank you. My name's Kathy Alexander. I'm a researcher from Australia, and my question is, how did you do it? And we are looking at California very closely. But my specific question is for Kevin. How did politicians convince the voters and the public to be ambitious on climate change, to accept these policies? Not so much now, but when you were more starting out. What kind of arguments worked? What stories did you tell? Because whatever it was in Australia, we haven't worked that out yet.
That's a very...
Let's get one more question first, and then we'll go into the answers.
Thank you very much for that. That was inspiring. I'm also from Australia. I'm afraid we don't have a good track record of policy certainty and investor certainty. So I'm here with Multi Faith of South Australia, but I also wear a hat for Repower Port Augusta. We're trying to build Australia's first solar thermal plant with storage. So I've got a dual question, one about the value of dispatchable energy, but how to get support for the first build, to get the cost of that first finance down.
A couple things. One is just coming back from Canberra, from Melbourne, from Adelaide, as well as Sydney. I want to give a lot of credit to the Australians because of your advancements with regards to water conservation and water management. Obviously, going through 12 years of historic drought. Matthew just mentioned we're about to enter our 5th year of a historic drought. We don't know if climate has caused it, but climate is compounding the problem very much so. So you are very impressive when it comes to water management and conservation. When it comes to climate policies in Australia, obviously that's maybe perhaps a little different story. AGL is one of your largest utility, relies primarily on thermal coal, which you also export to other parts of the world, Southeast Asia, as well as to China. Obviously, as you know, coal is not good for the climate because it's among the dirtiest fossil fuels that harms atmospherically, as well as the other criteria pollutants that go with it as a co-pollutant. And this may go with the same question. I believe it starts with political leadership. Obviously, you have a change with regards to the Prime Minister. I believe that your subnationals, New South Wales, Victoria, other folks are perhaps advancing the ball more so than the national government. That is very similar to California. We are advancing the ball, not asking for authority or permission, but doing so in a manner that's forceful with intentionality. And I believe that the subnationals in Australia perhaps are the ones who will have to take the leadership, and that perhaps the national federal government will hopefully follow shortly. An example, again, is Canada, in the provinces of Ottawa as well as Ontario. There, just not to speak negatively against anyone in particular, but at the time they had a prime minister who was not keen to renewable energy or the topic of climate. The provinces with their premiers and their ministers of energy moved forward separately from the national government. Obviously, Matthew just mentioned we have linked up our carbon markets with several of the provinces in Canada, and just recently, Canada has a new prime minister who now believes in climate change at a national level. So it can be done, but the provinces have to move forward, I believe, if the national government is not going to do so.
And on your second question on project financing for a first project, the key is to get an off-taker. Somebody has to agree to buy electricity over a long period of time. Once you get that, whether it's your state utility, whether the state government itself mandates it by policy, whether it is a commercial entity that's willing to take it from you, once you get that, and if there is a gap between what they can buy it at and where it is, lobbying your subnational for a policy as an investment for the future to bridge the gap. If you do those two things, there is plenty of money on project financing. Would you agree with that, Tom?
Absolutely. I think we had policy that made storage more economic. What I would add to that is that you can combine it with a financeable technology like solar or Bloom's fuel cells that are proven, have a small risk premium. And then if you have a big company, big enough company with a balance sheet, then we can either post LCs or we can facilitate the financing. And we're doing that as we speak. We're actually doing some storage in Australia as well. But you're right. It's been policies that change frequently.
If I could just add that what you need to do is adopt your policy and consider all the ramifications of that policy. So if you just say we're going to do renewables, but you don't look at the potentials for cost, then that will lead to this argument that we hear all the time. Well, if we do renewables, that's changing everything. That will lead to increases in energy costs. So the response to that is, one, we're going to stick with this policy because we're committed to promoting renewables, but we're not oblivious to the cost implications, so we're going to work on energy efficiency. So if there is an incremental change in cost, and we're not sure there will be, but energy efficiency will offset that in some way. Or you hear the argument that, well, if you change renewables, they're more intermittent, they're not quite as dependable. Well, so then you look at, well, okay, let's work on storage as well. We can invest in storage. You at the government level can help invest in storage, or we can encourage, if we're consistent in our policy, we say, look, we're sticking with this program, then that will encourage and incentivize investments in storage. And so we've got a policy in California that's promoting storage. We want to have 1.3 thousand megawatts of storage by 2020. That incentivizes, again, it goes to 2020, that incentivizes the private sector to really invest in the technology that's necessary to do that. So, okay, we've taken care of the storage. We're looking at ways that we can offset, if there are any incremental price increases, the cost. And frankly, if you say we're going to stick with this program, then somebody's going to figure out some way to invent the technology to take advantage of that policy. And lo and behold, as we've seen in the solar world, you don't get the price increases that everybody projected. And in fact, it sort of all evens out. And in fact, it becomes affordable within a short period of time. So you just need to make sure that you're looking at how all these programs interrelate to one another. Carefully, what we do in California is we've done a climate change scoping plan that says, look, let's look at the full range of options that we have for doing a climate change issue. Let's understand how they all interrelate. Let's look at the economic implications of all of this so we can figure out if there's something else we can do to offset potential impacts that are going to arise from these programs. And then you can say, look, we've taken a comprehensive look at this. We're going to deal with, we're committed to this change in our energy source, but we've thought about the implications of that. We've addressed and mitigated the implications. And now all we need is for the business sector to step in, and maybe we can incentivize them through research grants and that sort of thing. But we can all work together towards this common goal, but we're committed to it. So you just need to think it through and look at all the implications.
Well said. I saw two hands, one out there and one out there.
And we have one question here.
Okay.
We're up against the time limit, so let's keep these questions brief and our answers brief as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, it sounds like Californian dream is still sexy, so you're making your dream coming true, by the way. My question is about the policies. Mr. Kevin, you mentioned the fact that your model, your business model is kind of benchmark, and you are eager to export this model elsewhere. What about alliances with less developed countries? Because you mentioned Israel and Australia. Thank you.
Okay, we had a question over here. Okay.
We'll do rapid fire.
My name is Sandra Steingraber with EcoWatch, and my question is for Secretary Rodriguez and also for Ria Sue. So all this is very impressive, but California nevertheless remains the #3 oil-producing state. A lot of fracking's going on in the San Joaquin Valley. There's a lot of drilling that's making people sick in the Los Angeles basin. So it seems like California has a kind of dual personality, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. So you're building out the renewables, but what are you doing to address keeping it in the ground? So we had these 2 citizen rallies today, one outside that actually called out Governor Brown by name for being a climate hypocrite for allowing fracking. And then there was a sit down over here where everyone called to leave it in the ground. It doesn't seem like California is doing that. So I would like to hear a response from the Secretary, but also what is NRDC doing to push California to get off of fracking and oil?
All right, last question, and then afterwards, I'm sure if our panelist is nice enough, we can talk afterwards if that's the best. Well,
We'll do all 4.
I'll do all 4. How about that?
Thank you. My name is Milton from Brazil. My question is to Tony and Kevin, the 2 elected politicians. The concern is whether democracy is the right political system for dealing with climate change. If you look at the last 10 years in Europe, in the United States, Canada, in my own country, in Brazil, in Australia, democracy is going forward and then backwards. One step forward and one step backwards related to climate change. So my question is to the two politicians, what is the improvement in democratic systems to deal with climate change?
Okay, one last question, and then I think Madam Speaker will take 2 questions, and Kevin will take 2 questions. That way, we get all 4 done.
I'm Chief Colleen Sisk from the McCloud River in Redding, Northern California. And we're unfortunate to have missed the list of the BIA. So we have quite a few of our communities are without electricity and without water sources that seem to get overlooked all the time. And I'm wondering, like you said, the world is watching. And so I'm looking forward to the time where you guys include us in some of your planning, because right now the Shasta Dam sits on our land, and that 1941 Act of Congress was never carried out. And so we're feeling like if you want to call us unrecognized, then you also have not dealt with us, and that land is still ours. But with the indigenous people's rights, how will you implement some of the processes that need to be worked out with us? You know, none of you had mentioned, you talk about low-income communities and communities of disadvantage and how you're going to get funding to them, but you haven't mentioned at all the California Indian people, which 90% of us in California are in that unrecognized category. So I'm wondering with the, right now, we're facing the Shasta Dam raise, and McCarthy's tack-on bill to the omnibus bill is, going to happen in the next couple of weeks, which impacts our sacred sites,
I'll have them
our
address
way of life.
I'll have them address it. I think they got the question.
Okay. Thank you. We're at risk.
I think the first question, I guess, from you was the issue of exportation of policies or as they relate to developing nations. I know I gave an address just a few days ago at the French Senate, and in the audience were federal legislators from throughout the world. And one of the themes throughout COP-21 has been, industrial nations put money into a pot to help developing nations, especially given the fact that many of the industrial nations have created the most amount of carbon in the history of humankind. And what we try to do in California is to address this with 535, which is the investments in communities that are disproportionately impacted by climate change and other criteria pollutants, disadvantaged communities, which is inclusive of all people who are disadvantaged without singling out anyone in particular, if you're African American, Latino, Native American, Asian American, poor, white, etc. If you're disadvantaged economically and you're in a zone that you're disproportionately impacted by co-pollutants, CO2, as well as other criteria pollutants, you will be a beneficiary of 535. But in developing nations, obviously that some of them have no grid at all whatsoever. We're working closely with the administration to engage whoever wants to engage with us in California. And I can tell you one thing right now, we're more than happy to receive delegations, or when the opportunity avails itself, to actually go to other parts of the world, which has happened before on numerous occasions, so we could help with technical aspects as well as public policy. We do know that the Chinese, as well as other countries, come from all over the world to California, and they actually spend time in California learning about the technical aspects of it. But first and foremost, before it gets to the technical, it has to start with the public policy. That means the political leadership. So political leadership from those developing nations must want to do this and must be engaged, and we're more than happy to engage and work with them.
If I can just quickly add while you're wandering around, to the point of disadvantaged communities, California also has more than 120 sovereign nations in our state. And so there's that. There are communities that don't have access to clean water, that don't have access to innovation and technologies. Part of the water bond that we passed last year, almost unanimously, is trying to address some of the issues around water and getting water to communities and making sure that they have the resources through the department to have assistance with technical assistance to make sure that when we spend that money, it's going to get a return on investment. So when we have to go back to the voters for additional money for our infrastructure, we're able to make the case that we've been able to do what we said that we would do. To the question of democracy, I still think that democracy is the best process because it is the advocates, the stakeholders, the community groups that press on us continuously, and frankly, it's why we are continuing to move forward on some progressive policies. It's the communities. It comes from the top, or from the bottom and the top, and we have to meet in the middle. And we're going to continue to have to hear from communities who feel we are not addressing their needs. That is the nature of politics. It's the nature of democracy. And we clearly have more work to do. Today, we focus on what we've done that's been brilliant. But we know when we go home to California that the implementation, the challenges, the struggles are still there. And we still have to be responsive to all of our communities.
Thank you for that. And I want to thank the panel for this wonderful discussion. And we're well over time, so a round of applause.
Could I just on the fracking issue, and well, two things. One, we do have an Indian consultation or Native American consultation policy at Cal EPA to reach out to tribes, both federally recognized and not federally recognized. So we know that we need to work with the indigenous peoples in California. So we are working that, and our programs, our grant programs using cap and trade funds can be used to help indigenous peoples. On fracking, I'll just say that, you know, change doesn't happen overnight. Our goal is to reduce petroleum use by 50% by the year 2030. That's why we're promoting electric vehicles. That's why we're looking at alternative energy sources. We know long-term where we want to be. But until we get there, we're still going to be using some oil. I'd rather use it when it's in California, so we don't have to bring it in by rail from outside the state. But, you know, we try and balance out all those things. I will just end by saying that within my agency, we've got the Air Resources Board, the State Water Resources Control Board, the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessments, the Department of Toxic Substances Control. Some of the best regulators or most effective regulators in the world, particularly at the ARB and the State Water Resources Control Board. They're working with the Department of Gas and Geothermal Resources so that we understand the implications of fracking, and we will continue to monitor what goes on with fracking. And so if we need to do more when it comes to a fracking, we're going to do that. We're getting the information that's available. So we're not just sitting back. We're not just doing nothing. We're moving toward a economy that doesn't use petroleum. It's just going to take us a while to get there, and we're monitoring the impacts as we go ahead because we don't want to do anything that jeopardizes our environment and leaves behind the legacy of pollution that we're dealing with, frankly, now from decisions that were made in California, you know, decades ago. So we're looking ahead. We don't want to do anything that causes a future environment secretary to curse me at some time. So, you know, we got it under control.